Lucien, hello. My name is Lucien Darjeun Meadows, and I'm coming to you in the first days of fall from the ancestral lands of the Arapaho, Cheyenne, and Ute peoples here in what is sometimes called Northern Colorado. Thank you to the Boulder Bookstore for the opportunity to chat with you today about In the Hands of the River, my debut book of poetry, just released in September from the wonderful Hub City Press. And here it is. When my partner and I first visited Colorado in 2014, the summer before we moved here, we came to Boulder, and the Boulder Bookstore was at the top of our must-visit list. Still such a favorite place whenever we go down to Boulder, so it's a delight to respond to their lovely questions about In the Hands of the River. Boulder Bookstore asks, what are some of the themes we'll find in this poetry collection? So In the Hands of the River follows an Appalachian family across generations, from grandparents and further past relatives to the speaker's parents and the speaker himself, who is reckoning across the collection with being queer, being of both Cherokee and Euro-American heritage, being in a West Virginia community scarred by coal mining and other extractive industries, not to mention mental health, family challenges, and the joys, but also dangers of coming out. Next, what inspires your poetry? Being a body, in this world. This collection would not exist if I had been raised somewhere else, somewhen else, or by other human and ecological relatives. I'm continually inspired by both the memories and histories passed down to me by family members, but also by the gaps and the silences in those stories. And I'm always reading something, usually many more than one something, hence all my hours in the Boulder Bookstore. And I'm in love with the amazing work of Appalachian writers and queer writers and Indigenous writers and more writers too. Often before I sit down to write, I either go for a run or spend time reading, as both are quite inspirational to me. Next, can you talk about how landscape, and particularly the Appalachian Mountains, plays a role in your poems? So in writing the acknowledgements for In the Hands of the River, I had to think, and you'll see this in the back, the river, the hills, and the holler who raised me. And throughout the poems, that sense of deep relation, of interconnection, really, between human and environmental bodies comes forward. The land is my family. Those Appalachian Mountains are among the wisest elders I have ever known. And especially for my years growing up in that West Virginian holler, that tiny rural community off the paved road when our mailbox was over in the next town. And even after we left that place for another rural home, my friends were the violets and the clover, the crow and the cardinal, the hills themselves and the river as they change with the seasons and over time. The title of the collection, In the Hands of the River, comes from a poem late in the book, where the speaker shares how both he and his father have found our eyes in the hands of the river and brought them home again for a while. I'm always looking for home. And writing alongside the lands who raised me is perhaps what brings me closest to finding it. So Boulder Bookstore asks now, growing up queer, did writing poetry help you explore this identity? I love how poetry creates a fluid and slippery space between the speaker of the poem and the writer. Sometimes, and in the hands of the river, the speaker is me. Sometimes he is me if some other choices had been made or had been able to be made. Sometimes I'm the you. Sometimes I'm splintered into every character in the poem, and sometimes there is no character who is me at all. I'm the observer, sharing threads from lives I've witnessed or heard of or imagined. And all this to say is a closeted gay boy in a rural space writing poetry was literally a lifesaver. If some poems were found, oh, they're just poems. But meanwhile, they gave me a space and a voice to write with and around myself. I'd say I came out in my poems before I ever did in person, and those coming outs were separated by some years. So I am very grateful to poetry, and it's a joy to contribute to rural queer poetry here in this collection. From the series of rather gay flower love poems like Violet and Lady's Slipper to, let's be honest, many of the poems throughout, including the poem Winter Solstice that ends the book. Next, how did you decide on the order of the poems in this collection? So after opening with the poem Rust, which puts us right in the holler, watching for flood, the book is in 4 main sections. 4 is an important number in Cherokee community. My initial sharing of the collection with Hub City Press had each section ending usually with a poem of the speaker's attempted death. I was writing into a silence that could only be jumped over with a section break, and I am forever grateful to my editors, Catherine Webb and Kate McMullen, for suggesting that instead the sections open with these poems. What happens after you've tried to end the world but failed? You have to go on. You have to keep breathing, keep making, keep loving. And that is so much more interesting. The way the speaker takes these shards and moves forward. And because of the placement, you get to watch them move forward, propels the book forward too. Next, what are a couple books you read during the pandemic that you really loved? Oh goodness, can I list everybody in my current reading stack? Early in the pandemic, I found help and comfort from Rebecca Solnit's A Field Guide to Getting Lost, a gorgeous collection of evocative, often environmental essays, and Driftpile Cree Nation writer Billy Ray Belcourt's A History of My Brief Body, another collection of essays on grief and trauma, but also love and joy as a queer Indigenous writer. And as our pandemic adventure continues, I have been dazzled by the releases this year of Nima Avashia's Another Appalachia on growing up queer and Indian in West Virginia, and Muskogee Nation writer Jennifer Elise Forster's poetry collection, The Maybe Bird, which is on ecological and colonial violence and hope, and the debut novel of Allegra Hyde, Eleutheria, which poses some crucial environmental questions as it reckons with climate destruction, queer love, much more. But okay, I'm going to get in trouble now. That was more than a couple books. So moving on. Boulder Bookstore asks, is there anything else you want us to know about your book? Well, in this book, I reckon with challenging questions and notions about Appalachia, particularly rural West Virginia, queerness, mixed race, indigenous identity, mental health struggles. And while these are heavy issues, the poems are often brief, often no more than a page, usually less, making them accessible to readers familiar with, but also readers newer to poetry. And perhaps the biggest reason that I write is in the hope that someone might read a poem and feel a little bit less alone. Think, oh, someone else has felt that too, like I did in the holler and here and there all those years ago. That makes it all worthwhile. That's why I write. And I hope this collection connects with some folks in that way. And if it does, I encourage you to begin or to continue writing or painting or making music or pursuing whatever art form speaks to you too. And last, can you read us a poem from your book? I would be delighted to share the poem Like Sun with you. Like sun. Brown eyes that leap the wings of crows. There was a boy in your father's stride that he once thought was you, that he said you will never become. Soft hands, watch him run. So open the front door with those hands, blackened by summers, rubbing his coal over your body, hands that know a boy feels like a nectarine, skin a sheer line between hush and never was. Up from the tree line, a wind rushes, feather thick, a fist. Your shoulder blades harden. Step out and run. When you forget you have feet, you will be free. Again, thank you so much to the Boulder Bookstore for the opportunity to chat with you today, and to all of you for giving In the Hands of the River and me part of your day. I look forward to our paths crossing again.